In today's show, we discuss, are social issue activists actually spreading a form of fascism? And also, the Globe Theatre in London has turned Joan of Arc into a non-binary character. Is this right?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Pasulo, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend, once again. I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell, Tony? What you gonna do, eh?
Why? Please, one day, just answer me,
I did it
throw me.
last time. I did it last week. What the heck, man?
You didn't do it last week. You didn't. You were still.
Oh, was I? Oh, okay.
Yeah, you were. You've never once been, hi. And throw me.
That's not me, man. Jeez.
I know it's not you. Come on, let's keep our tradition. Say hi to our audience.
Hello, audience. Anyway.
Here we go. Anyway, I'm laughing already, and I don't know what it is.
I'm sorry, it's not even a joke.
Okay.
You know, sometimes I don't have jokes for you because I am genuinely feeling a bit, in the mouth, down in the mouth today. It's so important. It's so important to have a good vocabulary. It's what I've been thinking about and ruminating on. See, ruminating. I have this pal of mine, and if he had only known the difference between anecdote and antidote, a mutual friend of ours would still be alive. It isn't bothering me.
That's okay. I'll let that one go. That's quite amusing for you. Anyway, let's move on.
I must try harder, obviously.
Keep them clean now. They're good like this. Anyway, before we go on with the show, I will want to ask our listeners and viewers out there if you'd be very kind to like, perhaps subscribe, or even comment on any of our shows. It doesn't matter what platform you're on, just literally like, comment, etc. That'll be great for us to know what subjects that we've covered that you've enjoyed, and maybe perhaps we cover again in a different view. So this feedback that you provide is really valuable to us. And again, it doesn't matter what platform you happen to be listening on or watching us on. Please comment, subscribe, and like what you hear. We would really appreciate that. Thank you for that. Anyway, let's move on with today's show. Now, in today's show, we hope to maybe again discuss a couple of topics rather than just a solitary one. But we'll start off, we'll see time permitting, of course. We'll start off with the first one, which is, are social activists spreading fascism, or I suppose fascist tendencies? Taya, what's your view?
Well, for fascism, I wonder if, were the fascists were themselves left-wing, weren't they?
No, I thought they were right-wing. They were conservative.
You thought they were?
No, I think they are.
Oh, because, you think they
are? I've got a definition of fascism for our listeners to see what they think. But there is consternation about historians and political scientists actually have they haven't got an agreement on it, funny enough. They do have conflicting views, but it's often characterized by a dictatorial leader. That's fascism. You've got a centralized autocracy, militarism, if I've said that right, forcible suppression of opposition. And that's the key. Forcible suppression of the opposition. And that sort of aligns with what we wanted to discuss. But the point is, activism, which we were going to touch on, and fascism are different because they don't have a dictatorial leader as such. They don't have a centralized autocracy. It's normally a state or government that would have that. And certainly they don't have militarism, whatever that's the term.
Militarism.
Yeah. They don't have that. They might have some arms if some of the fringe elements of whatever movement it happens to be. But the one that we do question is the forcible suppression of the opposition. That is the only one. And by activists, we're talking any activists, aren't we here? We're mentioning all the social activists out there for all the different types of groups. I mean, climate change, for instance, you've got some activists out there who are on the extreme edge. We've also got LGBTQ and its associates are also on the extreme edge. Black Lives Matter and other of this ilk, where you've got activists who are perhaps overzealous, can we use that term?
Mm-hmm.
In their approach, and it comes across wrong. I mean, what's your view?
Yes, well, it's good that we've sorted out what we mean by fascism, because I think a lot of people who are politically aware would probably roll their eyes and go, oh, God,
Yeah.
what are these people talking about? No, they're not fascist. But they do have fascistic tendencies, I think, as you rightly said. So I agree with you completely. And I think you and I, when we're talking, we really do concentrate a lot on the opposition. On the opposition to opposition, which is
Yes.
a strange fact that they don't tolerate opposition, and it's getting worse and worse. Now, I'm interested in why this should be the case, because a lot of these fascistic tendencies have risen in societies which applaud themselves for their history, correctly so, a strong history of good democracy. And you think to yourself, well, why is it that a democratic society is headed in the opposite direction from these histories which have furnished that society with so many freedoms? And it seems to me, I've been doing some reading about it, and it seems to me as if there's an argument. I don't know if I agree with it, but I'll tell you what the argument is. There's an argument is that it is actually the fault of the internet, strangely enough. Whereas the internet was always thought of in the early days as it was going to be an instrument to spread democracy and to democratize the world, it's actually had, surprisingly, the opposite effect, in that it has allowed people to more easily censor other people. So instead of it opening up the world, it is closed down. And instead of opening up the world to free speech, it has closed it down. Sorry, you were going to say?
Yeah, I was going to just jump in there. Do you mean the internet as a whole, or do you mean certain platforms which sit on the internet? So because the internet as a whole is just a medium of exchanging information across the planet, and no one governs that exclusively, but you've got certain really big platforms that sit on the internet, social media sites, I won't name them, where you've got a big gathering of people on those platforms, and the way that those platforms generate income, they are encouraging certain viewpoints and then showing and reinforcing those viewpoints from other people sharing that same viewpoint. So the individuals on those platforms only get to see one narrative, one area that they seem to agree with, and they never see someone else's point of view. And so that then creates this polarization and creates a society, as you rightly say, that becomes split in its views. You get a certain demographic who are viewing things just by a single viewpoint, and that group can grow depending as more people get thrown into the algorithm. And so we get this really weird scenario where you have these groups, quite large and significant groups, that all believe or behave in a certain way because they're fed the same stuff every day. And unbeknown to them, it's a brainwashing exercise because you don't see a wide spectrum of viewpoints so that you can be more selective. And you may not still agree with them, but at least you can understand someone else's point of view. When those points of views are not presented, you only have your own. That's all you see. That's all you believe. So it can be that's more of a problem in this case.
Well, there are two aspects to the internet. One is the technological aspect. And I think we can all agree that if you're living inside what is described as the Chinese, now is it the Great Chinese Firewall or the Chinese Great Firewall?
Yeah,
It's
one of
those.
Yeah.
It's one of those, which is if you're operating from inside China and you go onto the internet, if you don't use a VPN, you'll be highly restricted in what you can see. That's the technology. That's just, I mean, think about living in North Korea.
Yeah.
It's worse than the Chinese Great Firewall because I think in North Korea, if you actually try to connect to a VPN, they'll come around and knock on your door pretty sharpishly, and you'll be in a whole heap of trouble. So you absolutely cannot technologically get out from within the silo in which you've been placed. And then, as you rightly say, in the West, we've got our public discourse taking place on a small number of platforms where those platforms get to decide what is free speech and what isn't.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the original idea of free speech. Free speech used to be that we had an ability to offend people. But we have a young generation now called millennials, and the millennials are those who were born between 1980 and 2000. And they're becoming sort of, well, if you're born in 1980, you'd be what now? In your 40s, would you?
Yeah, 40.
In your 40s now. And if you're born in 2000, you're in your 20s now. So in that sort of general range, these people are now, they're now in a position where they wield enormous influence in our society. And they are odd. They are the children of democracy who themselves are not, according to some data I have here from the Washington Post. And I will share the link with you as usual so that you can put it on our blurb. According to some data here, they are less inclined to be to applaud democracy as older generations, which is kind of peculiar. And it seems to come down to that they think that democracy is a bad system because it allows different points of view. They think that these points of view that are held by some people are so offensive that they ought not be allowed. So that democracy naturally opens up. The mere fact that democracy allows a multiplicity of opinion is what they're against. Well, you and I, being older, we were brought up to think that we love democracy because it allows a multiplicity of opinion.
Exactly.
Everyone has got a voice, and not all voices have to be the same. But for some reason, which I haven't been able to extract from this Washington Post article, although it is interesting. For some reason, millennials do have that attitude. So we see when a millennial says to you, it is more important for people to be not offended than for you to be speaking the truth. The truth is actually secondary to not offending people. And I guess that is reflected in this idea of the trans identity thing, that where a trans person, you and I, well, I don't know about you, I don't want to speak for you. I would look at a trans person and go, well, objectively speaking, do you have 2 sex chromosomes And what are they? So if you have 2 sex chromosomes and one's a Y, you're a man. If you have 2 sex chromosomes and neither is Y, you're a woman. That's it. And if you've got 3 sex chromosomes, you're intersex, and you can basically be what you want to be because you're intersex. You're an aberration. And that, to me, cuts out all the nonsense, because what we have is an objective set of standards. But for the millennials and for people of a certain age, that doesn't work for them, because some people will be offended by that. And so, even though it's objective, even though it's reality, even though those are the facts, they have to be subsumed by our willingness to not cause offense. And that is exactly what we see.
I do want to take you up on the word that you used, aberration, when there's something not quite right with the X and Y chromosomes, where I don't think that's an aberration. It's just a difference. And because the individual still comes out as a human, there's not a problem with them, but they have a difference with their genitalia. But that doesn't make them an aberration. It just makes them different. So the term itself, maybe I'm not happy with, not because it's offensive, it's because it's not necessary for that description. That's all. But you're right in your other description, where XX is a female, XY is a male. And there are those 2 genders. It has been since the dawn of time. People can choose to be their sexual preference. That's absolutely fine. That's their own autonomy. But they can't change their gender, because that's at a level of a biological level that is just set. You may have a different wired brain in the body that you're in, which is absolutely fine as well. It happens. So you may feel that you're in the wrong body. And so you may say you're in a female body, but you veer towards a male wired brain, and vice versa. That's absolutely fine as well. It happens, because when at birth you get so many chemical bits thrown into the mix that you can have this difference. But it's not an aberration, in my view. It's just a difference. But again, the fundamental, what we're saying is you cannot change the gender. And going back to our topic, in terms of the our activists who not just, we're not focusing or picking on LGBT at all here. There's some climate activists who are the same, who will not accept or even listen to an alternative point of view, where there are people out there who are questioning some of the climate facts. Now, they could be wrong. Of course they could, but they're allowed to question. That's what keeps people on their toes, so they can consider new things. So if you suppress everybody's viewpoint who doesn't align with your own, then you're heading for disaster. Your eyes are not open. You need to have alternative views just to grow as a society, as a race. So suppressing it, thinking, no, doesn't conform to my viewpoint, it must be wrong.
Yes, quite right. And I'll come back to that in a second. Meanwhile, I'll go back a little bit, and I've sent you a link as well, which is from a handy resource, and I think a lot of people should become familiar with this resource. It's called dictionary.com. I'm not affiliated to dictionary.com in any way by saying it's a handy resource and you should become affiliated with it. It's free, it's on the internet, and it's a reasonable dictionary. It is an American dictionary, so you have to be careful if you, like me, prefer British English. But I've sent you a link there, and it's aberration, and you will find that it says it's a noun, 2 meanings: the act of departing from the right, normal, or usual course, which is not what we're talking about. But the second meaning the act or instance of deviating from the ordinary, usual, or normal. So, I am absolutely correct to call three sex chromosomes. I believe it's XXY, the intersex chromosomes. They are not ordinary. They are unusual, and they're not normal, and they are therefore aberrations. So,
For
you
me,
must
the
not.
term seems to be has now taken a more negative view. That's probably why.
No, that's your problem. I mean, dictionary.com is a dictionary.
Okay.
That's everyone's definition. So if you want to have your own specialized definition, well, that's up to you. But no, I mean, this is what we're talking about. This is a fact. These are the facts. That is the factual dictionary definition. Okay, so I've defended myself there. I used it properly. The climate change people are interesting, and they're very close to some other people that you might not ordinarily think of in this situation. And those are the so-called scientists of today, who do not tolerate certain points of view that disagree with theirs. I think you know where I'm headed.
Yeah.
I'm headed towards things like evolution and astronomy. Not astronomy, I beg your pardon, cosmology. Like, where did the universe come from? You know, the Big Bang Theory and things like this. It's a lot of times people say, and I say the same thing. If I was arguing with someone, I'd say, well, your position, has that appeared in a peer-reviewed journal? And that's what I used to say. You know, has it been published in a peer-reviewed journal, or is it just somebody spouting his, if you like, mad philosophy on his own? Until I began to understand that like getting your article into a peer-reviewed journal to a large degree depends on you towing the party line, the conventional wisdom. And it's very hard for scientists to get their opposing voices into these journals, and therefore they're not heard. So our science is also going down that horrible route, the route where you're getting into a silo and you're only hearing one side of the argument. And what these people don't understand is that an underground movement comes about. And it's not even a movement, it's just an underground an underground. What am I trying to say? An underground convergence. There you go.
Okay.
Convergence.
Okay.
Yes, an underground convergence of different people who come to the conclusion that, look, we're not being heard here. And then they start off a hidden silo, that, you know, a hidden stream, a hidden space, which grows stronger, but because it's hidden, nobody knows what's going on. And some of it can be benign, but some of it might be malign because you don't know what's going on there. I am also going to point towards this, because I've spoken of it before, that my fear about people who won't let racists and racism, people who have got racist ideas, won't let them speak in the public space, that they're driving them underground. And then when they're driven underground, we don't know what they're saying. We don't know what's going on. And if it's like a pustule that bursts, and it bursts into a fracas, a major fracas in society, it'll come out of the blue, take everyone unawares, and we have no idea of how violent and virulent it would be. This is the problem.
The thing is, though, I understand this viewpoint, and it's healthy for society to allow alternative viewpoints. That's part of a democracy. And I know there's a lot of people who dislike democracy for the reasons you've already described earlier in the show. But you've got sort of a line that can't be crossed, though, because yes, you're right. If you prevent racists from speaking out, then it could go underground. But then you could have pedophiles that would make that same claim. Why can't I spare and speak out if I'm allowed my voice? Why am I not allowed to speak out while these other people are? So there is a level of tolerance across society as to what level of freedom of speech we're allowed. And that bar, you don't want to lower too low, because then you get some of these horrible people like pedophiles popping above the line and wanting to put, hey, I'm allowed to speak. I'm a free man. I can speak. Free society. And you don't really want to encourage that, because the majority of the population are the ones that set where the line is. So you can't have a total restricted or unrestricted free speech society, because otherwise yes, people have the right to speak and give their viewpoint, but as we've touched on it before, but it's what platform are you using?
Okay,
if you can affect thousands, or in some cases hundreds of thousands of people in one go, then that platform should be restricted. So freedom of speech is curtailed in those circumstances. But on the street, yeah, you can give your viewpoint. You should be free to give your viewpoint. But there are still levels that maybe we have to be mindful of crossing.
So this is where you and I go our separate ways. I believe that, yes, this is where we differ, because I believe that people should be allowed to say and to pursue what they want to pursue. You see, they're just talking. Just talking about it is fine. Actually doing something about it, that's where we have a problem. So if you're just saying, I want us to be a society that allows sex with minors, I think that's okay, because a lot of us will stand up and say, no, for these various reasons, we can't have that. But it's okay. We don't need to suppress this conversation. And we can even try to figure out, well, why do you want to have sex with minors anyway? And we can get to the bottom of it. Maybe we can even develop some kind of syndrome and say, look, this is actually some kind of psychological problem. And perhaps because we're open and we're discussing it openly, we can get to a situation where we've got some kind of treatment for it if we decide that it's a medical condition. So these are the benefits of being open and being able to talk about things. And as long as we don't go from let's talk about it to without society's permission, let's talk about it, so let's actually do it. There's nothing to be afraid of. So if racists want to say, look, we need to send back all black people and throw them out of the UK, all non-white people and leave the UK, well, let's hear your arguments. Let's hear them. I don't think we should be afraid. We should trust people. And it's a question of trust. Let's have the conversation and let's lance the boil whilst we can.
Okay.
Or if maybe they do have a point. Maybe people like me should pack up and leave. Who knows? Let's hear look, facts and evidence. Let's hear your case. Right?
Okay.
That's what makes us different from these activists who want to shut everyone up. Because it always boils down to, in the end, it boils down to we know best. We know. We are more woke. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. We are more tuned in than you are, and we know better than you, and therefore you should listen to us and only us. That's taking away our agency. That's the problem. You and I, we and everybody else, by the way, we have a right, an innate right. We were born with it, to our freedom of thought. So we should not be prevented from thinking freely, and we also were born with the ability to speak and to communicate, and no one should curtail that. And that's the difference between, at least in my case, that's the difference between me and these activists, that they want to stop other people. They believe they are better than the rest of us, that inherently they know better than the rest of us what is good for us.
I think that is part of the problem. I mean, we're not going to bandy every activist in the same group and tarnish every single one with the same brush. But there are a growing number who, as we've touched on already, are not allowing, this is the crazy thing, not allowing and instantly suppressing a different point of view, no matter who that is. And that's wrong, as you rightly say. But is this a problem I mean, on those same lines here, is this a problem where it's at government level, or is it a problem where the government are having a hands-off approach and letting because it's a social issue, hands off, letting people deal with it themselves? Because ultimately, that is what democracy does. You shouldn't have forces in society that aid one group more than another. In this instance, you should be able to hear both views, and then the majority take what they believe is to be the better view. So government's not getting involved. They're using hands-off approach. We don't want the government to get involved. We don't want the government to set these conditions or rules or whatever. We want them to be hands-off, so that people work it out for themselves. So the people themselves should not be suppressing other people. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm confusing the issue here, but it's that government is not involved. So we can't blame the government for encouraging or discouraging this sort of behavior. It's just standoffish and letting society deal with it itself. But when one group becomes too powerful and oppressive, like what we're seeing in certain cases, too zealous, then something needs to be done to rebalance that, so that people can have differing views and be able to express those views in a manner that is sensible. So we're talking, if someone wants to say, I dislike climate change, for instance, they should be able to, as long as they're not in a disrespectful, argumentative, shouty, in that sort of discourse. It's the whole point of dialogue. It's got to be respectful dialogue. So when it's respectful, both sides need to be able to hear what's been said on both sides, without one of them raising their anger level and going, you're wrong. That doesn't achieve anything. And at the moment, that is sort of what's happening with some of these activists.
I don't think I agree with you to say that the government is sponsoring these people. I think
No, they're not. They're not. That's what I mean. They're hands off.
Well, they're not hands off. They're piggybacking on it in many cases, and it's not the government. It's elements of the government. So when it suits a politician, he or she will piggyback on one of these celebs, or whatever, however you say that, celebrity causes. And when he or she is challenged, he or she will use the same technique of suppressing opposition, because it suits politicians to not be questioned and to be beyond questioning. So I think it's led. This is a bottom-up thing. I think this is from the activists themselves, and it's a bottom-up thing. It's been adopted by elements in our national institutions and governments. And I think you and I the other day were talking about when we found out that it was, or maybe it was this Nigel Farage kerfuffle. Nigel Farage is a British politician who was.
Well, American colleagues will know who he is because he's a friend of Donald Trump.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, others who are not Americans.
Non-American audience. Yes, international audience won't know who he is.
An international audience. He is a politician who is very strongly identified with the British Brexit movement, and recently has had his bank accounts closed. And he thinks it's because of his activism, political activism, and support for Brexit. And Tony and I were talking about it, and then it seems right now that it is the bank, his bank that has closed his account, that was overreaching. So it wasn't a question of that activists were necessarily going to the bank and writing to the bank and saying, can you please close down this man's bank account? But that people within the bank were piggybacking on the Remainer, if you like, or the opposition to the Brexit, on activism, and took it upon themselves to close his accounts. I'm trying to say that this kind of overreach, or a better case, I think that's still questionable, but a clearer instance would be when the NHS in Southampton started putting up posters in hospitals saying that men can breastfeed. So that that became another cause to there. But how can a man breastfeed? This is a hospital. Don't you know what a man is? And obviously they weren't tolerating opposition there either. It turned out that's the NHS and some people within the NHS in Southampton. It was not a national thing at all.
No, it wasn't. But this is what happens, though, isn't it?
It was
This
a
is
local
where,
thing.
yeah, local. We were discussing this before, where a lot of the problems, I don't believe. I mean, okay, there are certainly examples where this isn't the case, but the majority of people in power actually want to do the right thing. They do. Okay. The majority do. There's going to be some that aren't for sure, but the majority are looking to do the right thing. So they have some integrity. I'm not going to say completely innocent, because when they're put in a corner, then they can lie like the best of them. But on the whole, they want to do the right thing. So when they pass rulings down, different segments of the government structure going down want to add their take on the interpretation that's been provided. So if something is a general ruling or a general suggestion, the lower levels of government want to apply that to their area that then adds additional value to justify their position. And sometimes they interpret that message incorrectly and apply their own take on the message and apply it in a way that is not what was originally intended. And we see this where different councillors in different areas of government are all given the same instruction from high on above, but interpret it all differently. So is it the fault of the government because they didn't make it clear and specific enough? Or is it the fault of the individuals in those lower level government areas who've added this twist or their own interpretation to the original instructions, which then leads to problems? And you get places like Southampton where the health authority there have obviously interpreted the instructions from head office or wherever the NHS central departments are and gone their own way and put their own steer on what the interpretation was, which is possible because it's made the news. We haven't seen any other hospital do this. So have they taken it on themselves to do it? Or is there some, broadly speaking, initiative from government? Everyone else has pretty much applied it, but they've taken that the wrong way. It can happen. Communication can be made, what's the word I'm looking for? Misconstrued? Yeah,
well,
it
shouldn't be misconstrued in a situation where people can actually pipe up and challenge it. And how long should those posters have stayed up if someone had just walked in and said, no, men can't breastfeed, I'm a man and I never had the opportunity, and there's no man on this planet who has the biology to lactate. And that would have been the end of that. But because of the silos we're talking about, because of the silencing, there's this chap called Karl Popper. I've quoted him before. He was how would you describe him? He was a philosopher of science. And you and I, well, I don't know, I've mentioned him several times, especially when I was talking about falsification. He came up with this idea of falsification of theories, that you have to be able to falsify a theory. Karl Popper. Oh yeah, I think I spoke to you about it recently.
Yeah, you did.
Too.
Yeah, you did.
Oh,
You
good.
sent me some information
It
about
says
it.
he developed this paradox of tolerance, and he's saying that in a truly tolerant society, the paradox is we must be intolerant of intolerance. And it's a bit of a conundrum, because if you're tolerant, shouldn't you be able to tolerate intolerance? And his argument is no, you can't tolerate intolerance because eventually the society will become intolerant. And I think that is exactly what has happened to Western society. We have been so tolerant that we have tolerated intolerance, and we have therefore become intolerant. To a large part, society has become intolerant. We've got to go back to the beginning. We've got to say, do you know what? We are tolerant, but we will never, ever, ever again tolerate intolerance. And that's where the millennials are going wrong. They are working their way into a cul-de-sac that is going to be terrible, because they themselves are going to end up being trapped inside that cul-de-sac. And I don't know how they'll be able to get out. We see this with the left fight activists. A day ago or 2 days ago, I believe it was Australia, or it could be America, the climate change, maybe even here in the UK, climate change activists, no, it was America, climate change activists stopped a parade for a while. They carried on eventually, but for a while they stopped a gay pride parade, because they said the gay pride parade was using buses and vehicles and things, and obviously the climate change people don't like that, so they actually block them off. And those are the activists becoming intolerant of other activists. And we see now that the trans activists are attracting intolerance from feminist activists, you see. So it's that thing about these various formerly mildly cohesive spheres will now
oppose one another
and become intolerant of one another until what happens to society. Anyway, I think that's about what I have to say about all this.
Okay, so going back to this topic itself, because I'm mindful of the time, I want to cover another topic very briefly after this. So in your view, are social activists spreading fascism or fascist tendencies or not?
They are spreading fascist tendencies. They're not spreading fascism itself, but they are spreading fascist tendencies.
I think the overzealousness and the fact that they, just because they're following one element of fascism, which is to shut down opposition, that doesn't make them fascists, but it does make them overzealous, and it does make them closed-minded, in my view. They do, I mean, their causes are all worthy in their own right. Of course they are. Well, that's different viewpoints, of course, but the way they make those viewpoints is the thing that can turn people away. It's because if they've got, like, climate change, for instance, most people support climate change. But if climate change activists...
Most people support climate change theory. I don't think they support climate change. I think they're against climate change.
The fact is, the theory, in order to rectify the issue that we've got now. So most people are actually on board with that, and they're doing their bit to help. But if this activism for climate change becomes too zealous, where, like, you've got some protesters now, which are the Stop Oil protesters, for instance, they are becoming too antagonistic, and they're not listening to anyone. They are literally going in to disrupt all sorts of people just to get their voice heard. But you're now alienating the very people you want to get on board that can help your cause. So this overzealous nature of activism, although they will justify it by saying we have to do this because we're on death's door, supposedly, this overzealous activism is actually turning away the very people that you need on board to make this happen. And this is the same with the other social issues that are being discussed that we've touched on, the LGBT movement, Black Lives Matter. There's loads of them. But they all have to be careful as well not to alienate the very people they're trying to convince that their viewpoint is the right one. But equally, they have to also understand that they will get opposing views, and just respect that. Try and change those views with logic, not with bashing people over the head or repressing their views. That does not help their cause. And even though I'm for some of these, I do not like the overzealous nature on some of the tactics that are used, because that will actually alienate people from what they're trying to put forward. And they should be respectful and listen to other people's point of view and use logic to change people's point of view, not by suppressing their voice. Okay. I've done that one to death, haven't I? Right. Okay. Let's move on. There's another one I want to touch on, which is sort of, well, not quite the same, but it's, whether you're aware of this, there's a theatre in the UK called the Globe Theatre, and they've just brought out, well, recently, the Joan of Arc story. But what they've done is they've turned Joan of Arc into a non-binary character. Tayo, what's your view on this?
Load of bollocks, mate. Let's be serious. It's offensive. It's offensive nonsense. Yeah, I'm offended by this.
First off, do you want to tell people who may not know the story of Joan of Arc? Some listeners and viewers here might not know who she is. So, do you want to give
Joan
a quick
of Arc
recap?
Was a remarkable person.
Female.
Remarkable female.
Female. She was female.
Yes. Joan. Yes. French.
Yes.
French.
Jeanne d'Arc. Her name was. She was born.
And what was amazing is that she was what, 16, 17?
17, yeah.
17-year-old peasant girl somehow got to lead the French army in the medieval ages. This is when men were men and women were women, and presumably men knew what they were doing and women knew what they were doing. And there was a king, and he was fighting, the French king was fighting the English king. And a 17-year-old peasant girl led the French army, and you would think, by common sense, that would have been the end of the French army. But no, she won.
She won against the English.
She beat the English. I mean, you couldn't write this stuff up. I mean, if it hadn't happened in real life and you wrote a story like this, people wouldn't even go to watch the movie because they what a load of nonsense.
Yes, nonsense. But it was true.
But it's actually true.
Yeah.
And she did. Now, I don't know how she got it. I've never fully understood how she got herself into hot water, and the poor girl ended up being burnt alive at the stake
at 19.
Which must have been at 19, which must have been anyway sliced a little uncomfortable. So I think but the whole story is just astonishing. How? You know, well, there it is. When I talk about Joan of Arc, I lose my mind because how did that happen? How? I'm
stunning,
speechless.
Really stunning for someone so young.
Wow! I mean, you actually hand over an army. I mean, who even followed her into battle? I wouldn't. It's like Greta
what did
Thunberg.
She do? What did she say? How did she turn over these people?
You know, Greta Thunberg like that. I'm not going to walk behind her and protest. She's 17. She should be shutting up, for God's sake. But people did. I mean, men did. Real men. And, you know, there we go. What can you say?
It's incredible, isn't it? But
how did we go into Joan of Arc?
Well, no, because we were going to give a little synopsis.
That's a synopsis. That's the story. So
yes,
the Globe Theatre is. There's a rumor. I mean, it'd be nice to think. Some people think it'd be nice. Some people believe it'd be nice. Okay, I'll say that again. Some people think it would be nice to believe that the Globe Theatre in London stands on Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, the playwright's original theatre in London. But it's very vague and most unlikely that it does. However, you know, it'd be nice if it did. So it's a hallowed ground for the theatre, the English theatre in the UK, in England anyway. And when they put on a play such as this, they're making a statement. So the statement is, we are going to make a play about Joan of Arc, but we are going to make the central character, Joan of Arc, we're going to make her non-binary, which in this day and age means she's going to be a lesbian or
Sexless.
something.
No,
What?
sexless.
Sexless.
Sexless, yeah.
All
Meaning
right.
that she is not non-female or male. You don't know.
Which to me is amazing. You know, in a day and age where the feminists are continually saying that the patriarchy is bringing them down, that, you know, the male power sphere is constantly bringing down the female aspect and femininity. You would voluntarily take a genuine feminine heroine, a genuine one, and then try to make it sexless, a genderless. What's all that about?
I have no idea.
That is a direct attack on femininity. I mean, you're one, not one, but one of the most outstanding feminine characters in all of history, and you want to take a gender away. Why?
No,
Why?
that doesn't make sense.
It
But
doesn't
imagine this is the story. Imagine they change the character to Jim of Arc or James of Arc.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what I'm saying. If they'd have done that, would you think that there would be silence or would there be uproar? Uproar.
Cataclysmic uproar. What are you doing?
Exactly. So I don't quite understand why they've decided to take, as you rightly say, this hero of the feminine movement, I suppose, because she was the age that she was, to lead an army to victory is astonishing. And they want to not celebrate this, not put it at front and center and show the wonder and success of women when they put their mind to it. No, you then lose the gender and make her non-binary, which is absurd, as you say. I'm baffled by this.
Yeah, that's a good word to use, actually. Baffled.
What I did try and do is trying to find out. I mean, obviously, I did check in who it was that wrote this particular production, and it just so happens that they used a non-binary actor to play Joan. Okay, and they're citing that the storytelling experience is supposed to share imagination and excite people to explore different narratives and different people, whatever their gender, deserve to be championed. But they could have picked a male role, because let's be honest, there aren't many female heroes in history. And someone so powerful as Joan of Arc should not be one that should be played with and changed in this manner. There could have been other male roles that could have been changed to non-binary if they wanted to do that. But why pick this one? It doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense. And it just devalues women by doing it. And they shouldn't have been allowed to do it, in my opinion. But then again, it's a free society. People can do what they want. I did try and find out whether or not the audience figures were affected. There is no data. No data. Normally, you can find the data when performances are on and see how well they did, roughly. There's nothing available for this. I'd love to see.
Tells you everything you need to know.
Well, I'd love to see how many people actually went to see it, knowingly that the main character was non-binary, gender fluid. I don't get it. But that's what really surprised me. I thought I could find if the numbers had gone up, perhaps out of curiosity, or in fact gone down. But the fact that they're not available makes me question why they're not available. Are the figures have the figures flopped? Is it even still show? Is it still running? I don't even know that. Is the show still on air? Is it not on air on at the Globe Theatre, or has it been taken away? I don't know. There's none of that information that I could find online. So I don't know whether they've purposely hidden it, not making it available because it flopped. I don't know. Or it was a success. But if it was a success, you would have thought that would be abound and they would try others along those lines. But I'd love to hear our audience, the female listeners in particular, what their view is on this. So if any of our female listeners out there are commenting on any of our shows, please let's hear your viewpoint on this particular one. Should Joan of Arc, who is a heroine, a major heroine for women, should she have been portrayed in a non-binary way? Has that downgraded her, so to speak, in the eyes of many? I don't know. What's your view?
My view is that if they didn't trumpet their success from the rooftops, then they didn't have any success from the rooftops. And besides, my view being that when you do something, it should bring something new to the table. It should bring some added value. And if you make Joan of Arc non-binary, what are you adding to the value of the story? What does that change bring extra to the story? Nothing. I don't see that it does anything. It doesn't make it more interesting. It doesn't make it it's just an unnecessary modern virtue signaling piece of nonsense of a theater, which is.
But you're taking something away from the story in actual fact.
Well, there you go. So, I mean, I think that the circumstances of her being able to rise to the ranks that she did, to the glory that she did in three years, by the way, or 2 years, whatever it was, that to me is the story. But if you take that away and you just make us a non-binary, it just doesn't bring anything. It just doesn't add anything to it. And it's like, why are you doing this? Well, because they want to, as I can give you a quote here. I'm going to give you a link again to share with our audience. This is from the Metro newspaper, and they're quoting the Globe Theatre itself.
Okay.
And it says here, Shakespeare was not afraid of discomfort, and neither is the Globe. We reaffirm that we are committed to being an inclusive and diverse organization. End quote. In other words, they are busy virtue signaling. It's nothing more than that. They're not bringing anything to the table here.
But you can do it in other ways.
Yeah, well, I agree. But I'm saying this is what it was all about. It was just virtually signaling, and hopefully it did flop because it's nonsensical. But I'm really surprised that the feminists didn't really go to town on this.
Well, why? I don't know. We haven't heard anything. Why have the feminists not had a go at the people of the Globe Theatre for even putting this on? If you're going to do something like this, pick on a lead male from history, maybe. Because it's but if you're going to do this, like say the argument here is it's the offer a possibility of another point of view. If they're going to do that, give a different point of view. Don't pick on one of the few
genuine
heroines that should be raised up for what she did it was a completely male dominated world back then, but she rose through the ranks and led the French army to victory. I mean, that is astounding. It should be, lauded by feminists around the world that someone in that time was able to do something so fundamental. But instead, the Globe Theatre and its production team has taken it on themselves to sort of trample on that, to change the main character to non-binary, to take away that female power that was there during that time, which is just ludicrous in my opinion. But I'm just baffled by that view. I really am. Okay.
Same.
You've sent me that article, which we will share in our blurb. Now, I'm mindful we're getting to the top of the hour. Is there any more you wanted to share regarding this particular topic of making Joan of Arc's story into a non-binary character.
No, what I would say is this: if Joan of Arc had been, let's say, race swapped, that to me would have been a non-issue if it wasn't about the race. If you simply used a black actress because you happen to feel that a black actress had the acting chops to pull it off, and you didn't make anything, that is, in our world, the world of the audience, you see a black actress, but in the world on the stage, she's not black. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Then that would be, it doesn't matter. You're just using a black actress, and you're not making a deal out of race. It's fine. In this particular production, I wonder what the world on the stage saw in the non-binary Joan of Arc. Since I didn't watch the play, I don't know. So is it that we, the audience, saw a non-binary? I don't know how you do that, by the way. But in the world on the stage, in the make-believe world on the stage, it was the historical Joan of Arc. Or did they change it and somehow it was relevant and more unbelievable, therefore, that anyone would have had anything to do with her in those days, that she was non-binary back in those days. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Are you saying, therefore, that if the character who played her was non-binary but didn't act in a non-binary way, was still playing the part as a female,
then
it's a non-issue.
It's a non-issue.
It's a non-issue. But we don't know. The fact that they've highlighted it as being different, I don't think that is the case. But then again, we haven't got all the information because we haven't actually seen this. So we can only give our opinion. No, but we can only give our opinion based on what we've heard and read about. But not seeing it directly, perhaps maybe we're doing them a disservice. I don't know. But to me, it sounds wrong to change the champion of the story, who was definitely female, Joan of Arc, and make her non-binary. Personally, I think it's wrong, but that's just my opinion. Do you have any more to add before we wrap up?
No,
I think we have, yes, indeed. But we could debate this at length in future, I suppose. But unfortunately, we have reached the end of the show for another week.